The recent local government election result has altered the South African political landscape, so to speak. What was your reaction after all the mayors of the metros were voted in?
Well, first of all, and it's obviously a very clear demonstration that very, very many ANC voters, I think just above 3 million, did not vote. They did not vote for the opposition parties, but they did not vote for the ANC. And this, to me, is a very clear signal to the ANC that it has a great, great deal of work to do to once more regain the support and the confidence of these 3 million ANC voters. Secondly, I think the election results in some of the larger municipalities, the metros, shows that the ANC is fast losing support in these very critical cities. And if it doesn't do something about it, if it doesn't go back and do what it has to do, go back to the basics, deal with the deep-seated malaise and rot that seems to have crept into the ANC, 2019 may mark a serious watershed in a rapid decline of the ANC. So the ANC as a governing party since 1994, as a movement, national liberation movement, which was the preeminent national liberation movement, was not the only movement that fought against apartheid and racism. But there is no doubt that it was the preeminent movement. That those who have consistently supported the ANC since the 94 elections are very unhappy with what they see happening inside the ANC at the moment, also inside the government. Thirdly, for us, we must understand that the ANC is not of significance only for the people of South Africa. It is of great significance for the region, for the African continent, and for the progressive world, because they still look to the ANC and to South Africa for being part of a greater movement for progressive change and transformation in our continent and in the world. So in that sense, the losses suffered by the ANC is also a blow to progressive change and transformation in the continent as well as the world.
And how should the how should the ANC re-engineer and renew itself and reposition in the light of these losses we're talking about? And the new power configuration in these metros, also how will they affect service delivery when you factor in the public sector unions and their links to the ANC?
Well, no, there are a number of questions involved.
Yeah, I think the second one is more relevant. That's the one again. Yeah, how will
well, what has happened obviously is that in these municipalities, no party, including the DA, except in the Western Cape, in Cape Town, won a majority vote to set up a government on its own. So in the case of the DA, Nelson Mandela Bay, in Tshwane, in Mogale City, in Johannesburg, entered, and in some parts of KwaZulu-Natal, entered into a coalition agreement with other smaller parties. In KwaZulu-Natal, obviously with the IFP, in Tshwane, Mogale City, and in Johannesburg with smaller parties like the UDM, COPE, ACDP, and others. But even that, in Johannesburg, for example, is not sufficient to give them 50% plus one. So they were entered into arrangement with the Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF, whereby the EFF has undertaken not to enter into a coalition arrangement with the DA, but have undertaken to vote with the DA, which means that the DA could take over the reins of this municipal government because they had the votes of the EFF to elect the mayor, the speaker, and the chief whip of these councils. This is an extremely fragile relationship between the EFF and the DA. The EFF is on record as saying, if it remains consistent with what it's saying, that they will scrutinize the budgets line by line. The new budget will come in about a year's time. Now I foresee that there will be a great deal of horse trading between the EFF and the DA. Because the EFF are making certain demands about where they think the money should be spent. The DA has its own vision of what it wants to do. So we'll have to see if this works out. But as I said, it's extremely fragile, and whether it can last 5 years, I have my greatest doubts whether such an arrangement can last 5 years, because the tensions and the conflicts that will emerge in the course of this arrangement may prove too great for both sides to handle. Because remember, even though the DA is in coalition, it is the party that is discussing with the EFF and will continue to discuss with the EFF all of these issues. So I think for some time, the municipal administration will not necessarily have a great deal of stability. On the other hand, the DA may well put in a lot of resources to try to improve the quality of life of a lot of people in these municipalities. I rather suspect that some sections of big capital will put in the resources to help create jobs, to deliver certain services, because those sections of big capital are negative, if not hostile, to an ANC-led government. So it's possible that the DA could pursue policies that could lead to some improvement in the lives of the people, which will then make it more difficult for the ANC to win back the support of those people. So I think we're in for an interesting time. We're in for an interesting time. We will also have to see how the ANC in these major metropoles behave as an opposition party. Whether they have the capacity and the will to articulate and represent the aspirations of the masses of our people in a way in which they get the confidence of the people that they are a genuine force for change and transformation. I think we need to understand that the ANC is going through a very, very difficult period now. And if you want, we can talk about it later about factionalism, corruption in its ranks, corruption in many government departments, the arrogance of quite a number of ANC leaders and branches, and that in terms of their relationship with the masses of our people, the politics of patronage has angered many people. And so the ANC will have to show, whilst it is in opposition in these metropolitans, these metros, that they can continue to be the true representatives of the people of those metros.
Now, should the ANC relook at their model of electing its leaders from branch level all the way to the top 6?
I'm convinced about two things now, and convinced about it some time ago, but I think now the latest election results has brought it much more clearly out into the open. That for some time now, elections to ANC structure, starting from the branch upwards to the National Executive Committee, are not determined by delegates sitting down and just looking and deciding who are the best people and best equipped to lead this organization. But there are slates. People come with slates and people vote according to slates. Which what that means is that whether you are terrible or not, whether or not you have any capacity or not, as long as you're part of some slate, part of some faction, you get elected. I'm now convinced that starting with the top 5, every member of the ANC in good standing should not be given the power of voting to start with for the top 6, and then we can go through all the ANC structures. Because that seems to me a much better form of a democratic election than the present one where branches are supposed to mandate their delegates to conference, but that mandate changes, the delegates change, they go to an elective conference, and depending on who has mobilized them for which slate, they vote according to the slate. That has nothing to do, in many cases, with what the branches wanted. So I'm quite convinced now that we need to give that power, not to an elective conference, but that power to every single member of the ANC. I think the ANC needs to move away from a traditional view we've always held, which is that you don't in the ANC publicly go and look for positions. But we know this is happening. We know that people, even if they're not publicly declaring that they're standing for positions, you have situations where some people are even having election managers to begin to work with ANC branches, regions, provinces to develop some voting for them. Thirdly, we have a situation with the old system where 3 or 4 provinces, in this case, if it's KwaZulu-Natal, if it remains united, Free State, Mpumalanga, Northwest, if they come together, it doesn't matter what anybody else in the ANC thinks. They have the voting power to vote anybody into positions at the national level. So I think that has to change. I think the second thing that needs to change is that we need to change the country's constitution to go for the election of a president that must be directly elected by the people of South Africa. So the person that emerges from that election truly carries a mandate from the majority of the people of South Africa. Now, such a candidate would still be a candidate of a political party. It's highly unlikely that somebody standing on their own as an independent would have the resources and the backing to win such an election. So the ANC would still nominate whoever they wanted to be their presidential candidate. But I think the presidential candidate would then have to go and convince the voters that she or he is the best person to vote for. I also don't see why in our metros and other places we can't go for directly elected executive mayors. Why can't we? Why should the people of a city not necessarily want to vote for a particular party, but maybe for an individual that they think he has the qualities to lead the municipality and belong to such a party. And you see in England now that in London, the Labour Party candidate won the London local government elections for mayor, defeated a multi-millionaire candidate from the Conservative Party, and in the context in which the Conservative Party had just before that won the national general elections in that country by quite a big majority. So I think we need to move in that direction. We need to move in the direction of empowering our people so that we give back our people the confidence that we're not only having representative democracy, but more importantly, we're moving more decisively in the direction of participatory democracy. We must have participatory democracy so that our people feel that they are not marginalized, that they are not excluded, that people, as they tend to say, you people only come to us when it's election time. So I think that there's a need for a great deal of strategic discussion to start with inside the ANC as to how we can change the system, which will become, in the long run, I think, more representative of what the ANC members want on the one side, on the other side, what the people of South Africa want. Secondly, I think in terms for the ANC, I don't think that the present leadership as presently constituted, and given the serious divisions that have been caused by factionalism inside the ANC, has the capacity to bring about the kind of changes that are necessary. I think the ANC should set up a group of 30 or 40 people, what I call a committee of elders or a council of elders. It could be chaired by somebody like former President Kgalema Motlanthe, who would be given the task by the top 6 of the ANC to really sit down and make a strategic analysis of what has gone wrong. But these are people, or must be people, who have no interest in contracts, who have no interest in wanting to make money, who have no interest in getting any political position in the ANC. Their only interest is to defend, protect, and promote the interests of the African National Congress. And they must then have the courage to go back to the leadership of the ANC, the top 6, the NEC, and tell them the truth. Having made a serious assessment, analysis of what they think is wrong and what needs to be done. I think the third thing that such a group could do is really also try to look at what is it that has prevented the ANC from actually implementing its positions. If you go back to the NGC that was held just about a year ago, both the president of the ANC as well as the Secretary General of the ANC were scathing in their criticism of the way the ANC was functioning. But nothing seems to have been done to give effect to those scathing criticisms, to take the kind of action that would help to resolve the many disputes, conflicts that are weakening the African National Congress today. So I think that you need to have a fresh look, if you like, think out of the box, so that we're able to deal with the present challenges, serious challenges facing the African National Congress.
And now, this call of an early conference, what is your view on that call by the ANC?
I think a call for an early elective conference right now is a no-no. You'll have the same people coming to an elective conference and electing more or less the same people on a slate. So I think what the ANC needs before an elective conference, and remember an elective conference can also be very divisive, because people come with their preferred candidates, and as they did in Polokwane, they behave in an appalling manner in support of their own candidates. So I think what is needed first and foremost is a consultative conference, which is what a council of elders could convene. And that consultative conference would be convened by such a group of people, so that you don't have a situation where you have a consultative conference, but the delegates are then selected by some of the very same people who tend to be central to the problems and challenges facing us. So you need a consultative conference where you can have an open, honest discussion of what needs to be done. And that consultative conference could then make proposals to the ANC leadership about how we can go forward. So I think the ANC does need a consultative conference before an elective conference takes place. But if you take an elective conference now, I don't think it's going to be helpful to the ANC. I think it will just lead to further divisions inside the ANC.
And the ANC and its alliance partners lately seem to, the cracks are showing everywhere, especially the SACP and the ANC. What's caused these fault lines now of late?
Well, let me start with the SACP. Historically, the SACP and its leadership had played a very, very important role in helping the ANC to deal with serious challenges that confronted it. In the 30s, Moses Kotane, who was then the Secretary General of the SACP, of the Communist Party of South Africa, wrote what he called a letter from Kraddock, in which he asked for the ANC to go and reinvent itself. It's a very important letter which helped to push the ANC in the correct direction. But if the SACP leadership, as presently constituted, are themselves part of the factions inside the ANC, then I think they don't have the capacity to assist the ANC to bring about greater unity and cohesion inside the movement. And therefore, when sometimes some of the SACP leaders speak, the response is yes, but they were part of the problem. And they were, in my view. The SACP played a very important role in the processes leading up to Polokwane and that. So Polokwane took decisions, fine, they took decisions about who should be the new leadership of the ANC, and that is correct. That is at the moment the responsibility of an elective conference. But the way raised that then led to the early recall of former President Mbeki, the SACP was playing a role in all of these things. Now, as I say, historically the SACP stood above a lot of the conflicts and tensions in the ANC, so that when they spoke, when they went to the ANC leadership was willing and prepared to listen. In Morogoro, which was a watershed conference for the ANC, when President Tambo said he will step down as president of the ANC, the people who went and asked Comrade Owab to come back were all of them leaders of the South African Communist Party. But they went there not as leaders of the Communist Party, they went there also as leaders of the ANC, and they put the interests of the ANC first. The party also played a very important role in terms of assisting the ANC. I say assist because the ANC itself has their own theoreticians and intellectuals, but assisting the ANC to have a better understanding of the nature and character of apartheid society, the nature and character of capitalism, what needs to be done. And so the SSCP has always played this role. But when you get SSCP leaders who say that we don't want to be a party of Kotani, what does that mean? And so I think that that's one of the problems that we face now, that in all our regions, provinces, and many SAC people, not all, because there are some very good SACP people who are still trying their best to do things in the best interest of the ANC and the people. But they themselves, as I said, become part of this faction. They themselves are people who are looking for positions. They're very critical of tenders, tender pressure, whatever they're calling it. Tenderpreneurship. But their own people are sometimes involved in these things. So I think that's been one of the difficulties we've been facing, that the SCCP has not played the kind of role that it should play. COSATU is a very, very powerful trade union federation, and you need a powerful trade union federation. You need powerful trade unions whose primary responsibility is to defend and promote the interests of its members, to be in the leadership of also ensuring that the working class is not always at the receiving end of the wrong policies that take place. Now COSATU itself is running into difficulties. Its biggest affiliate, NUMSA, has been expelled. There are a number of other unions. Now FAO itself has indicated that it's going to leave COSATU. So where there is a split in the trade union movement, this is in the interest of business, not in the interest of the workers. And so it can possibly lead to a weakening of the capacity of a great union like COSATU to really, as I said, defend and promote the interests of its own members and the working class. Thirdly, if COSATU itself is weak, then COSATU cannot assist the ANC in terms of dealing with the multiple challenges that we face in running a country. So you find an alliance that has been weakened. It's an alliance that has been weakened by factions, and COSATU itself is driven by certain forms of factionalism, by patronage, by people who are looking for positions. COSATU itself, and I don't think it was incorrect, I don't think it's incorrect now, got itself involved in setting up or relating to certain business institutions. So COSATU needs to have a very serious examination of where it stands in relation to all of these things. But what is clear is that we do need a powerful trade union federation, and we do need a federation such as COSATU is. And so I think it's in the interest of everybody that we should try to strengthen both COSATU as well as the affiliates of COSATU.
Now, the standoff between the Minister of Finance and the Hawks is quite unfortunate. Could it have been handled better, perhaps, to avoid it affecting the economic outlook and especially the performance of the rand?
Well, I think there's unseemly spat between the Hawks and the Treasury and the Minister of Finance. It's very regrettable. How does a public institution like the Hawks conduct its work in a way in which it, one, humiliates and demeans the person that they think they want to charge or they're threatening to charge? And then on the other hand, the Minister of Finance then just takes a very firm position that he's not going to go and answer a summons from these people. But that also shows that there are some, it's a reflection, if you like, of the divisions within the government itself and the kind of position that people are taking. And unfortunately, this notion of a war between the Treasury and the Presidency sometimes emanates from people in the Treasury itself. They are talking about a war. Now, how do you have a government department at war with the Presidency, which is at the apex of governance in this country? Now, the Deputy President himself at the funeral of Reverend Stophilia said that the government is at war with itself now. But if you're at war with yourself, how are you going to be able not to implement the kind of policies and positions that are in the best interest of the masses of our people in the context of a weak economic growth, very little development, in the context of a world economy which still has not got back to a position of a proper takeoff in the major economies of our world. In this situation where you require the greater unity of purpose between government, business, and the unions, we find that the government itself is at war with itself. Now, it's not possible. Secondly, you then give the completely wrong impression to the outside world. And not only investors, but also very many of people of goodwill who have a wonderful, wonderful view of the ANC, of this country, who participated in the anti-apartheid struggle, who want us to succeed, who then get demoralized themselves in terms of the kind of support and solidarity that we still require. So I think it's very, very important that this must be put to an end, and the quicker the better. If not, then the government is going to tear itself apart. Then you're finding that the state-owned enterprises, Eskom, now Denel, it would be Transnet the next day, are now openly coming out with the most harshest criticism of National Treasury. So I think that needs to be resolved, but it has to be resolved politically, both by the ANC as well as by the cabinet. But if the cabinet is divided, how is it going to find the necessary ways and means to bring to an end this thing? Now, the ANC, I see today, has asked for the Minister of Public Enterprises, Lynn Brown, to bring together some of these warring groups. But if you're not going to listen to what the Minister of Public Enterprises said, and some of these SOEs sometimes are taking a position in which they think they're even more powerful than the minister, then you do have a problem. So I think that this needs very, very serious, mature, quality political leadership, and that seems to be missing from the center, which can bring these things together, which can knock these heads together, and which will impose some form of discipline on all of these things, on all of these people that work, that lead the state-owned enterprises, that lead government departments. So I think that there's a serious, serious need, as I say, for mature, quality political leadership to come from the center, both from government as well as from the African National Congress, to knock these heads together, because this is doing a great disservice to the people of our country.
And how are all these political developments linked, you think, to the 2017 conference?
Well, once you have factionalism, once you have election slates, once you have a position in which people are sitting and conspiring, never mind the ANC's position that the time is not ripe yet to talk about elections and leadership positions, then what you're going to get? You're going to get an ANC that's continued to be divided. And divided not by policies, not on ideology, dislikes. And sometimes these individual likes are connected with money, with getting tenders, with getting contracts, with getting who is going to assume certain positions of power and responsibility through whom they can get contracts. Now once you do that, then you're reducing the movement to nothing but a bargaining shop. So that needs to be dealt with, and dealt with, in my view, rather decisively.
You think that the ASACP, with the current attacks that are going on in them defending Comrade PG, and will survive, or they will eventually look to break away, as what we've seen what is happening in KZN?
Well, look, the SSCP is an independent organization. It's always been an independent organization. It has its own constitution, it has its own policies, it has its own programs. It always had that. But its importance lay in helping to get the ANC together, in helping to develop ideological and policy positions which help the ANC to better, as I said earlier, to better understand the context of our struggle. The SSCP, I should have said, of course, also played a very important role in raising the level of internationalist consciousness of the ANC, and before that of the South African Congress of Trade Unions, of the people of our country, so that they got us to better understand what was going on in the world, to better understand the power and the mechanisms and the dastardly way in which the imperialist powers behave. So quite clearly, just to repeat again, it's going to be in the best interest of all of us if this alliance can get together and really work as an alliance. And it's an alliance led by the ANC, so the ANC has to take the lead in this respect. But it has to then bring them together in a way in which you strengthen the organizational capacities of the three, as well as SANCO. As you know, SANCO is what they call +1 in the alliance. So you need that second thing. Certainly, I think that one of the big failings of the ANC in local government has been the failure of ANC branches and local government authorities to set up proper ward committees. The whole idea of a ward committee, which came when Sidney Mufamadi was Minister of Local Government, which I still think was and remains a brilliant idea. Because the ward committee is supposed to be representative of the community, and the ANC people should be represented on those committees, but you bring together people who are not inside the ANC. But the ward committees should be your principal transmission belt for information from the municipality to the local community. But it's not a one-way thing, it's a two-way thing. You then go back to the community to try to understand from the community what is it that they want. I still don't understand why these local municipalities, what is supposed to have been done, is they don't go back to the community to discuss their budgets. Why can't you go and consult with the communities? You may think that building a clinic might be the most important thing, but community might think at that moment in time that building a reasonable road for them is of great importance. So the ward committees were supposed to have given, and still is supposed to give, the possibilities for the municipalities, the administration, the councillors, to get a much better idea of what the community thinks. But it would also help the councillors to be in constant contact with the people, so that this business where sometimes some communities erupt in violent protest and demonstration, you should have had sight of it beforehand, so you can try to see whether you could do something to resolve those challenges and issues. So I think what needs to be done now, even for the ANC, even where it is in opposition, it's really to very seriously go and help to set up ward committees and ensure that the ward committees operate in the way that they're supposed to operate.
Dr. Pahad, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate that.
Okay.